We are live, everyone. Please begin.
Hello and welcome, everyone. We left the best session for the last day. And this session is leveraging technology for all. Now, technological innovation has us in space. It's also provided us with solar cells, the insulin pump, water filtration, and wireless headsets, which many of you are using today. Technology has also allowed for us to meet on this virtual platform developed by Verizon. So, just a hand there for Verizon for being able to pull this together for us today, for this week, pardon me. Now, we have three amazing applications of how technology is being used, and we would like to actually share that with you during this session. So crowdfunding for local artists during COVID, a health information system to plan and manage public health response, as well as harnessing big data to provide fit for purpose information direct to decision makers. Now I have the pleasure of introducing our three panelists, and may I please just ask you to switch on your cameras as I introduce you. We have Taniela Tokailangi. Taniela is Fijian and he lives in Seattle, the United States of America. Now, Taniela works for the Pacific Islands Health Board of Washington, and he's also an entrepreneur. Taniela also supports single mothers to sell masi or tapa online through Vahi Mahi Tapa. Taniela is on this panel to represent his group of 4 young Fijians who started Space Jam to support local artists. We'll hear a bit more from him after this. We also have Lenara Fui, pardon me, the Acting Chief Executive Officer for Health, Technology and Communications, Ministry of Health, Samoa. Now, Lenara has led the development of policies to reflect rapid changes in technology. This has enabled the ministry to use effective and relevant tech in routine clinical and health practices. Now, Lenara has been working on the deployment of real-time data systems to provide clear, current public health information to decision makers in Samoa. And last but not least is Dr. Stuart Minton, the Director General of the Pacific Community. That's the community that I work for. The Pacific Community, or SPC as it's more commonly called, is an intergovernmental regional organization that applies science and technology in trying to address some of the development priorities of the 26 member countries and territories here in the region. Now, Stuart has an extensive background in the management and modeling of environmental data, the online delivery of data, modeling and reporting tools to improve natural resource management, which, by extension, is also quite applicable for the Pacific around how we use it to deal with disasters, climate change impacts, as well as sustainable development. So thank you very much to our panelists, and we will continue with some sessions with each of them. So first up, we have Taniela. Taniela, if you could please just join us. Yay, okay. Bula and welcome, Taniela.
Bula Binaka, Maram Matagal. How are you?
Very good, thank you. I hope you're well too.
Well, thanks.
So technology allows us to communicate and interact with one another, with very little effort and across great distances. So Taniela, I actually found your use of Twitter Space quite intriguing. And in particular, how your group of 4 young Fijians came together to support local artists and their work in Fiji. Now, I understand that you've raised more than 35,000 Fijian dollars since Space Jam began. Could you please share with us how this novel idea of using Twitter Space came about and where you're at right now with it, Naka?
Naka, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity for having us on here on this platform. And also, Nadango Tanyala, Monini Namukamba Levu. Yeah, Twitter Space Jam has become a sensation over the past 2 months. It was something that was established by a very good friend of mine, Epeli Tuimbanga, who is the owner and the co-founder, is the founder of Quiviti. He's a fashion designer, well-established fashion designer that focuses more on It's Okay fashion. So yeah, Epeli apparently was so Twitter has this new feature called Spaces where people kind of chime in. It's more like something like Clubhouse, if you're familiar with Clubhouse, or just these Zoom calls that we have, but it's random people that's just chiming in from across the world. So it's actually on beta as we speak, so they're kind of like fixing things as we go. But Epeli had discovered this space, and one day we had someone from Tonga who was actually there was a Tongan boy who was performing on one night. And then we all went back and forth and we started asking him questions about his performance as an artist and all the good stuff. Epeli himself is an artist and is very well versed with the music and entertainment industry in Fiji. So he got the idea of trying to have mobilized the same concept with the artists back home. During COVID, a lot of artists, their gigs have come to a halt. Most of them are not performing. And it's been months, I guess, for most of them because of the curfew that as well. So this was just an opportunity to bring artists on this platform, have them perform, and Fijians from Fiji and across the world chiming in and enjoying Fijian music and then sending in their tips in Whakawela. Oh, and then we had Dan, another co-host in Paris who was part of Fiji Fashion Week, who also works in retail, who got laid off and had time to actually chime in as well and become one of the co-hosts. And Mr. Joe Teleni, who is currently a student at the University of the South Pacific, who has very good experience with graphic designing. We had asked him to join the group so he could work on the flyers that we actually send out prior to all these events happening every week. So we have kind of like 2 artists performing for us in the week. And there was a high demand of artists that wanted to perform. The audience had asked if we could have some gospel. So we had included Sunday spaces for gospel artists on Sunday as well.
Thank you, Tanyala. I mean, I was wondering if you'd maybe just share a little bit about Whakawela, what that means.
So, Twitter Spaces has developed this whole new, people are just learning. We're just learning how to use technology in the sense of, sending money across, transferring money with different apps that we have online. We have so many apps that, so the gang from the UK, so how they actually send money, they can send money through PayPal across to me over here, and then I could send it all together at once to Fiji. So it's just, technology has polished some areas that we're able to send money. Yeah, and out here in the US, we have, people are very well versed with technology that, transferring money is not an issue anymore. So yeah, we've just used all these platforms, Facebook Messenger is how we could send money. So we've discovered all these avenues of trying to send money across. So it's been working out perfectly well. And ever since we started Space Jams, so how it actually works is like the artists reach out to us if they want to have to perform. So we kind of slot them. We have a schedule that's slotted for the artists. And then there's 2 artists that perform. And before we go on to that, we kind of like have a group chat with the artist a week prior and kind of like show them how to use and navigate through Twitter. So it's kind of like we're learning as we go as well. So we are kind of educating folks that's coming on these spaces as well on how to use technology, in the sense like how we hop onto Twitter, or how someone becomes a speaker, or how you send money, or through what account, and all the good stuff. Yeah. So it's been a lot of learning in terms of, trying to keep up with, not that we say we're tech savvy, but we're trying to educate ourselves on how to use this technology.
I mean, that's really technology being used to demonstrate, to actually showcase how Soliselevaki actually works, across this digital space that actually brings us a lot closer together.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing that.
I like to call it the Soliselevaki in the digital era, where everyone is just chiming in and throwing whatever they're able to pitch in. Up to today, we've collected more than 38,000, but it is something. So up to today, we've collected more than 38,000. This is something that we also did prior to this Twitter Spaces. We had a GoFundMe page account that was organized by a group of young Fijians in the US, that we were able to send off 41,000 to an NGO in Fiji that caters to young kids. So yeah, that was kind of like, I had the hype from there. So I kind of had this skill to kind of go online. Okay, this is how we're going to run this. And yeah, with that one, that was after YASA. So, after YASA, we had a meeting with a couple of young folks here in the US. It's like how we are going to help out back home. So yeah, so we were able to raise 41,000, which was kind of wow. That's 41,000 Fijian. Helped out with kids who were returning to school, who were not fortunate enough to, whose parents were not fortunate enough to, buy school supplies and stuff like that. So yeah, with the same idea, when Epeli had reached out to me, I was like, man, I got this. I got the concept. Like I can, like we all have this, we're trying small ways to reach out and help back home. Yeah, so technology is something, and with the Twitter spaces now, we've had so many spaces that's going on Twitter. We have Livemo, one from Fiji Media, who does spaces on COVID and educating folks on, things about the latest news about COVID. We've had people like Akanisi Nabalarua, who hosts a space like Brown Girls Monologues, which is a curated space with 3 Fijian women who discuss, unpack, and celebrate through conversations. And then we have these little groups on Twitter spaces that have started their own initiatives, like my Naitas from the Sananandronga. They've started their own Hakwa gang initiatives. Like they've been just doing initiatives that's catering to people in their communities, Yoba Nation, the Sanomba, like, they've done food drives and stuff like that. And it's so interesting because everybody, like everybody on Twitter is able to see these initiatives and like, hey, this is how you donate. So, this is how we use this platform to send money across. And, and it's not only about the money now, it's becoming more like a family, like a community on these spaces. And that's one thing I really enjoyed about the spaces. We've come to a point like we've networked in such a way that and it's also given people like a sense of belonging. Like, although we're not at home at this moment, especially the people in the diaspora, we're able to pitch in whatever way that we can.
Thank you, Daniela. Look, for those of you listening in, I'd suggest that you try and grab a chat and a meet with Daniela on the side.
Yes.
Please make use of Hubulo. Some interesting conversations that we've had in the lead up to this. Daniela.
Thank you so much.
Next up we have Lenara. Lenara Tupaifui from the Ministry of Health in Samoa. Now, Lenara, thank you, Daniela.
Hello.
Hi, Lenara.
Ciao.
So, Lenara's been keeping this one a secret, and I know because I've talked to her And it's really this amazing feat that she's been able to pull off in Samoa to develop a visual platform that, that connects the COVID vaccination rollout in Samoa, the hotel quarantine, and support for the health facility assessments. And Lennar, your work's been really around getting that technology right, ensuring that the health sector has the access to actual real-time information, but that you're also able to produce credible current information to those actually making decisions about Samoa's response to COVID. I would really welcome for you to share with us how you've done this, and how engaged have the decision makers been around being able to interact with this visual platform, Pinaka.
Thank you, Litia. Just to start, first and foremost, I would like to acknowledge and thank Beyond Essentials and also SBC for giving me the opportunity to present. In case I take all the credit, but the system is actually developed by Beyond Essentials, and we're just the staff on ground taking this and making use of it to the best that we can. First of all, a little bit on the situation of COVID in Samoa. We declared state of emergency for COVID-19 on the 21st of March 2020, and therefore our borders closed except for repatriation flights that bring in our returnees and people that were stuck overseas. That's about 16 months of lockdown. So you can imagine there's been very minimal movement of people back and forth. And with our COVID-19 response, we feel like everything has been a rush, a race against time. Since March, we've been enforcing our border control and travel restrictions. We've been upping our game. We're preparing our district hospitals, isolation wards, ensuring we have adequate resources, consumables, PPEs, given the shortage worldwide. And not only that, upping our game as well with management of quarantine sites, the swapping. I mean, if COVID enters Samoa, it will only be through our borders. So we've been really trying to protect our borders and enforce our restrictions. Not only that, but also with the arrival of our COVID-19 vaccine, we've been really rushing to ensure that we vaccinate our people. All of these processes, we've been very fortunate to engage the use of Tamanu and Tupaya to manage our processes and our resources. With COVID getting closer to Samoa, it is very critical that we vaccinate as many of our eligible population as we can and as quickly as we can. The challenge we had was that our hospital has about 400 to 600,000 population record. So it was 2 versus population data of just a little over 190,000. So with that challenge, we turned to the Samoa Bureau of Statistics. We worked together with them, and fantastically, they were collecting data for the national ID last year in October. And the number they collected was a total population of about 212,000. It was cleaned and verified data, and it was given the minimal outgoing and incoming traveling. We were confident that this data would paint a more closer to 95% of an existing population in Samoa. That would be the great startup data set for our vaccination data process. So we imported this information into Tamanu, which is a patient-level health information system. And then we use this as our vaccination rollout database. So this is basically like a pre-registered data for our total population. And we were going to use this system to manage all our vaccinations for not only for the first dose, but also for a second dose. The great thing about Tamanu is that it can be available offline and online. We all know here in the Pacific, sometimes the network is not too good. So for example, when we go to areas with very poor reception, then we would switch to offline mode, and then we continue on vaccinating and entering data of people until we get to an area with good reception, or we come back into the office and then we sync that information. If internet is available out in the community, then you can quickly just sync in the information and you get the data in real time. But for the areas with very poor reception, then you just bring them in, sync, And the good thing is data is not lost, it's all there. And the other good thing about Tamanu is that it's got both a tablet version and a desktop version. So because we are running against time, we opt to take the tablet version out into the field. This means we don't have to take heavy laptops, look for chargers to charge a laptop, no carrying of physical boxes of paper. Like everything was just compact and easy to use on the tablet. It is also very user-friendly. One of the things we try to promote is not just the technology. The technology is really just a tool, but it's the people that are going to use it that will sustain using, and then will ensure we get the really good data. So we've been building the confidence of our staff, not just the data personnel, but also the nurses. So we found that after halfway through, most of the nurses were able to vaccinate and then just enter the data themselves. This really lessened the burden of trying to increase the number of personnel that go out by getting data and getting the information that we needed at the same time. Information that is collected on Tamanu is then visualized on Tupaya. So Tupaya is this visualizing software, and you can see a map of Samoa with may I ask Lisa if you can bring up the second slide. The second slide. The next one. Oh, the next one. Oh, okay. How about the first? Yeah, that one. Okay, so the last one just now. The one with the yellow dots on it. So the one with the yellow dots on it, that is what Supaya looks like, this one. So how we did our vaccination process was we roll out according to districts. So the area where there's a lot of yellow dots, that's the main Apia, the city area. And then we head towards the western side of the island. As the vaccination processes move, the colors, the orange and the red, indicate that there's less vaccinations. So as more people get vaccinated, the colors move towards yellow, orange, yellow, and eventually green. So you will notice on the western side that it's now all yellow. And that's because that's where our vaccination process has already passed. And then we're going to head towards the eastern side of the island, which is visually still orange. The good thing about Tupaya is we use this mapping, and then at the end of every week, we use it as analysis that we present to our public health team, and we are able to do interventions. For example, the inner parts of the island should all be yellow, but you will notice that there is still some orange and red dots, which means that the vaccinated eligible population for those areas is relatively still low. So it allows us to pinpoint which are those villages. You can click on each dot and then it will bring up, for example, what's already on the screen. It will bring up that village and the percentage of the village that's been vaccinated. So it allows our team to really reallocate and refocus our resources and just go focus on those areas and have a special team work on increasing the vaccination total for those areas. So it's a very powerful tool. Also, when we do rollout, if you can move to the second slide, please. The information is then sent to the National Emergency Operations Center. The National Level Operations Center mobilizes assistance from the police if we have to, the fire and emergency services if we have to, but their support is there. So the information we send to them, and they give us these kind of mappings with the roads already on it. So in order for us to better allocate our resources, for example, we get 10 cars for our mobile teams. So we have to send out those teams. The challenge that we had during measles was some roads will have 3 cars or 2 cars overlapping each other. So it was not very effective and efficient. Whereas this time, we allocate the cars to a certain part of the road and certain part of the village. That way, the team will just vaccinate that one road instead of overlapping and going into another road. Also, with these systems, like really glad that our people really took ownership of it. We have a saying in Samoa where "Esui whainga tu mawhawai," practices change but foundations remain. This system hugely assisted us with doing a better job at managing our vaccination rollouts. But it wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for the assistance of the village pastor, who's given their church buildings to be used for our community teams. Also the village leaders who go out and call out to the villagers to come in and get vaccinated, because nobody knows your village and your community better than the villagers themselves. So the system being compact and readily available was just a bonus on top of what's already existing traditionally. So yeah, we're really happy that this pulled through. The final photo with the teams going out, that was one of our islands, Manono Island. So that's a classic example of us, because the reception there is very poor. So as you can see, the team just takes their vaccinating coolers and the nurses and then the tablet, and they are good to go. They come back with good reception and then they sync that data back. No information is lost. And also with the picture of the, see? What? Thank you.
We're going to come back to you during the Q&A. So I'm sure that there's a few more that's lined up. Last but not least, I'd like to actually invite Stuart up. So one of the first things I'd read about Stuart was a comment that he'd made when he got interviewed at work, and this was after he joined. And it was really just a comment that went, I enjoy technology, new approaches, and innovation. And this piece of work that he's actually going to talk about, lends to some of that work that he's been driving for us. So one of the key themes that we hear when engaging with countries on risk reduction initiatives is the need for more data and access to actionable, tailored information for decision makers. So this is the Digital Earth Pacific is something that Stuart's quite passionate about. And it also tries to overcome that data divide. And also to overcome that data divide and ensure that the decision-ready products are actually being are fit for purpose, that can be picked up and used by our Pacific members to address, some key development concerns, and even around, challenges around water security, disaster reduction, just as examples. So Stuart, over to you, Vinaka.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to you all today. So I'm going to be quick. I want to talk to you about Digital Earth Pacific, which is a project that we're kicking off that's underway through SPC, but throughout the region as well. So first up, why are we interested in Earth observations? Earth observations are really, as it says, examining the Earth and measuring the Earth. And we do this from space, through satellite imagery, and we also do it in situ. And this is a study that was released in November 2019 that looked at the value of Earth observations to the APEC economies, just the economies that are part of APEC. And the current value was estimated at $372 billion per year. and it's expected to grow by 2030 to $1.35 trillion per year. And the question I ask is, what's the, how does the Pacific get to benefit from this huge growth in economic value from Earth observations if we are not actually making use of them in our daily work? So that's what Digital Earth Pacific is really about. So to give you a little bit of context, we've been measuring the Earth from space for the past 40 years since the original Landsat satellites went up into space, but we haven't been making good use of this information. This information is effectively photographs of the Earth from space, and to turn that into useful decision-ready products, or products that we can make regular decisions about water, about vegetation, about agriculture, about our coral status, about the illegal fishing or other processes. We need to do a lot of work to that data and turn it into useful products. And that has traditionally been very difficult and very time consuming, and only the domain of scientific experts. And this is where the Digital Earth concept comes into play. So in Australia, when I was working there, we developed a tool that we called Digital Earth Australia. And what Digital Earth Australia did was basically create an infrastructure that turned that satellite imagery from raw data into what we call analysis-ready data. This is calibrated, ortho-rectified, atmospherically corrected, so that you can compare these images over time, and then to transform those into decision-ready products. And by decision-ready products, what we mean is products that are ready to consume by the consumer without any specific expertise required. So if I can use an example, every day, anywhere in the Pacific, we can get our mobile phone and we can look up what the weather is going to be like today. That is because the weather bureaus make available to us decision-ready products. They don't expect us to measure the atmospheric moisture. They don't expect us to measure ocean currents, all the things that go into developing a weather forecast. And they don't expect us to become meteorologists. They just give us a product that is useful to us to decide whether it's going to be sunny or rainy, what temperature it's going to be, will it be windy or calm? And we are very used to using decision-ready products in that context. In Earth observations, we've been traditionally very good at giving data to people, but not actually transforming it into useful products. And that's what this infrastructure is able to do. So in Australia, as I mentioned, we developed this tool, and I'll show you a couple of examples of some decision-ready products coming out of Digital Earth Australia. So this is the first one. This is a map of mangroves over 30 years in a river in the Northern Territory. You can see the mangroves growing over time up into that northern tributary. And if you look to the mangrove stand on the right, just now you'll see a dieback event as that dies back. I'll play that again, and you'll see here. Okay, you can see in this area, the mangroves have died. So you've got a monitoring capability to monitor how mangrove health is going, and you can deliver this for every single mangrove on the entire continent of Australia every time the satellite flies over. So this is a transformational capability to monitor our environment over time. Next example of a decision-ready product. This is a map of a farm in Australia, and you can see this little black field marked in the centre of the farm. What you're looking at here in green is photosynthetic green vegetation. In orange is dry vegetation, and in red is bare soil. And for that field, what you can see is over the last 30 years, there's been a regular pattern where in this case, it's been a wheat crop. So the wheat is planted, it grows, it gets dries out, it gets harvested, and then the next year another crop is planted. And you can see that some years are more vigorous than others. And in 2004, there's a real change in that field, and quite a different pattern emerges. And that's because they planted almonds in that field. It's become a regular crop of a tree growing almonds rather than a wheat crop. So you can actually track 30 years of history in that field, but you can do this for every field on that farm, and you can do it for every farm on the continent. So you're able to monitor agricultural productivity across the entire continent routinely. So Digital Earth Australia turns the raw data into decision-ready products and makes it useful for people. We've made that technology available for the entire globe, and there are countries all around the world taking up this technology as we speak. In Africa, we've done this for the whole of the African continent, and recently an economic study in Africa showed that the annual benefit from this technology for the African economies was 2.3 billion per year. And we hope to see similar numbers in the Pacific. So Digital Earth Pacific is about recreating this capability for every country, for every island, for every coastal area of the Pacific, so that we can actually use it to monitor climate change impacts. We can monitor recovery from disasters. We can track coral bleaching, coastal change and inundation, water, vegetation, and agriculture. This is actively being developed in SBC at the moment with a small group of pilot countries, and stay tuned because you'll see this capability across every part of the Pacific in the near future. Thank you very much.
Stuart, I think this is really quite relevant given the current COVID travel restrictions, and the actual use of data that already exists and has been collected, for decades. And thank you for introducing that here. And great for the countries that are working on this. We have had some Q&A, some questions come in on the Q&A session, and while we're answering, may I please ask you to participate in the poll? There are a number of questions there that it will be quite interesting to get your feedback on. So Daniela, if I may ask, and it's one that's actually quite straightforward around the use of technology and social media platforms, that are becoming more, not just more routinely used, but also quite critical and crucial. How can we teach our elders about these platforms so that they aren't overly dependent on the youth? Naka.
That's a very good question. I have a background. I used to work for Microsoft at one point as a product advisor, and we used to have one-on-one teachings with learning sessions with elders in the communities, where we sat down and navigated through these devices and showed them, how to go on about it. I think it's more about the time that we can invest into it. And I'm sure they could quickly pick up. And also another thing is kind of like just translating things to them in our own language. That would be very beneficial in terms of like changing the names of apps into something, because I know like Facebook, they call it now Walamata back home. So, little things like that, just kind of like changing the language and just investing time sitting around with like we taught our grandmother how to use Facebook Messenger and how, don't call anyone, but people can call you because you have so many grandchildren. But, the fact that you're spending time and sitting down with your elders and, navigating through apps and how to use them, I'm pretty sure most elders are able to pick up how to navigate on this with using technology in this day and age.
Thanks for that, Daniela. And you are right. I think grandchildren have a lot more patience explaining technology to their grandparents than children are to their parents.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Even on Twitter Spaces, when we are hosting these sessions with the artists, there are a bunch of young folks who have their grandparents chiming in as well. So it's more like a broadcasting thing. And it's very interesting that one day one of my friends said that the Honorable Mrs. Fakatale was actually chiming in as well. So, just having them, engaged in these spaces too is quite, we're very appreciative of that, and also having them come on, just being part of what's happening as well.
Thank you, Daniela. We have a question for Lenara.
Nata.
So Lenara, in Samoa with this particular work with the COVID vaccination rollouts, what was done to encourage religious leaders and village elders to participate, as well as assist in the vaccination rollout in villages?
Thank you, Litia. I think in this area, I think this is what makes Samoa resilient to all these operations and processes. Pastors in Samoa have this role of being peacekeepers. If there's any change or any new system that we want to take into a village, usually the pastor will take the lead in saying a prayer or welcoming people. So by having these new introduced processes at the house of the pastor or religious leaders, people won't go make a ruckus or put up a fight. So I think for us, we're very fortunate that our pastors here have a role in keeping the peace and allowing for our community programs to be successfully done.
Thank you, Lenara. When you were talking earlier, you said something in Samoan, and I think that's actually very true, which is, practices may change, but the foundations remain. That's something that we really should be holding on to. There were questions yesterday around how do you effect behavior change, and it really is about engaging, with those champions or those leaders in communities to help effect that change for the better.
True.
Thank you. So I have a question for Stuart. This was Stuart, what sort of positive benefits will technology contribute towards the environment?
Thanks. That's a great question. I guess.
Question?
No, it's a good question. I think there's huge opportunities. As I showed with my presentation, the ability to monitor our environment and show change that's occurring in places that we might not be able to afford to visit every time. One of our big challenges is when you're managing large areas of land or ocean, as we do in our Blue Pacific continent, is how to actually monitor and track changes in our environment in a reasonable way. So these kind of technologies offer us the opportunity, for example, to track coral bleaching across all of our coral reef systems, not just relying on physically visiting or measuring these, but actually using this kind of technology to identify where there are changes occurring, to then allow us to target our interventions and our investigations in future. So this is not just an accounting tool in terms of allowing us to document an environmental damage event, but it allows us to intervene. It's a monitoring capability. So there's huge opportunities here for us managing our environment better through applying these sorts of technologies. Back to you.
Stuart. I actually have a question that applies to this whole session. And it's around the codependence between technology and energy. And the question is targeted at specifically at donors and governments, but I think it's a question that the bigger community needs to also be thinking about. And it's really around what are the plans to invest in the use of renewable energy to power communities so that they can access information and technology from these applications that we've just talked about. So it's an open question, for our three panelists. Please, if anyone has any ideas or concepts or comments to make, please feel free to do so.
I might have a go at that if that's okay. So Stuart here, look, this is a great question. I think in our Pacific region, we are currently very dependent on non-renewable energy for electrical power. But there are plans underway, and our member countries are very actively considering how they will transition to renewables in future. There's also some great technologies coming along in terms of small scale renewable energy power, but also small scale technology for access to things like the internet. So a good example is Elon Musk has launched a service called Starlink recently, which is a network of satellites around the globe that allows anyone anywhere on the planet to get very high-speed broadband with the investment of a capital investment of about $400 in a small satellite dish and a router that gives high-speed broadband access to anyone anywhere on the planet for that kind of for a quite cheap price. So these kind of things are going to completely transform our ability to provide access to technologies in remote villages with very localized power sources in future. So there are real changes on the horizon for this for our whole region. Back to you, Latea.
Stuart, would any of Daniela or Lenara like to have anything to add on? Okay.
Nothing from my side.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I have another question, Stuart, which is around Digital Earth Pacific, which is, will users in our countries be able to access Digital Earth in real time?
Yes, thanks, Latea. Yes, the idea here is that with decision-ready products, your products are available through mobile phones, through iPads, through the internet in near real time. And while I say near real time, what I'm talking about is that the satellites are not continuously observing us. They will cover the whole region roughly once every 5 days. And at a resolution of every 10 square meters. So if you can imagine the size of your garden, your backyard, you're getting an update once every 5 days. So it's not actually real time. You're not seeing a live action process, but you are getting regular updates of how that's changing. That gets updated on a regular basis. Back to you.
If I could just ask my 3 panelists to please come back on. I think we've had a really good session, and I'm sure that there's probably more conversations that could be had during this session. However, given the constraints of time, there's a lot that we've shared, that you have shared, and there'll probably be some follow-up questions later on. But I just wanted an opportunity to say thank you very much, just for sharing what's being done across the 3 areas that you've presented around the use of social media platforms, not just to crowdfund, but to actually connect the community together that probably didn't know each other at the start of the pandemic, and being able to connect families and friends as well. Lenara, on the work that you've been doing in Samoa, congratulations. So for those of you who don't know, Tupaya is actually is a navigator, Polynesian navigator, who helped Captain Cook, who probably actually showed Captain Cook the Pacific that he then went on to rediscover. And so Stuart, Minakava level, I'm sure that there's a lot of questions around Digital Earth Pacific, a lot of interest from the the people on this session. And again, Pinakavalevu, thank you for the panel, the session coordinators, Lisa, Makireta Vinakavalevu, and thank you very much. Stuart, Lenara, and Taniela Vinaka.
Okay.
Bye. Take care.
Mode Naka